Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is December 21st, 2020. It's the winter solstice, and we're almost at the end of 2020, less than 2 weeks remaining. Congrats if you made it to this point in the year. Let's also have a quick moment of silence before getting into the video for everyone who didn't, or who wound up in jail or some other situation at the hands of the general capitalist tyranny that we are experiencing in this country. Okay, so for everyone who is here, welcome, particularly to the new subscribers. We gained about 300 subs in the last month. That's tremendous. This channel was founded in February of 2020 as the Democratic primaries were going on in the United States. That's where I'm based. And yeah, we've grown to about 1325 as of the time of this recording. That's great. I hope we can get to 5,000, maybe higher in 2021. On this channel, we do about 1/3 current events political commentary from a Marxist perspective, and then about 2/3 of audiobooks and discussions of other historical materials, often, again, tied into parallels with the present, because that is the point of studying theory and history, is to shed light on the present. Particularly in the United States, there is a lot of stumbling around in the dark, repeating mistakes, trying to reinvent the wheel. All of this is needless. There's 170 years of history since Marx and Engels put out the foundations of modern socialism. And if you just came into this like this year or last year, please stick around with this channel, even if you're not a Marxist now. I guarantee you will learn and grow by participating in this community. There is, like I said, almost 2 centuries of socialist history, theory, ideology that we can draw from to make more rapid advances. We know a lot more about socialism now than we did 100 years ago or 150 years ago or 200 years ago. We know a lot more. And as we continue with socialist revolutions and experiments going forward, and tactics and strategy going forward, we need to step it up, because capitalism is leaning the boot on our necks pretty hard, and we don't have time to waste. We don't have money to waste. We don't have energy to waste. It really it heartens me to see the advances that we have made. Even 5 or 10 years ago, there just wasn't the amount of far left media and social media that there is today. So that's great. But it's also depressing and withering to see a lot of people making the same mistakes. Why isn't the left unified? Blah, blah, blah. Step back and learn and listen, because there are people who have been doing this. If you do that for even 6 months or a year, okay, and just humble yourself for that short period of time, you will, the following 6 months or year or whatever, be a much more effective participant in your own liberation and the liberation of your class. So that's what we're going towards. But again, welcome. I think that there's a lot you can get out of this. Upcoming in 2021, basically we'll be continuing with this basic format of about 1/3 of political commentary on current events, and then 2/3 of audiobooks. Topics include women and socialism. We'll be continuing with the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide, and then supplemental files off of that. We've been doing a Malcolm X series lately. I just started. And I also intend to get into some Maoist third worldist theory, which basically posits that the first world left is fundamentally different in some key ways from the third world left. If we wonder why there aren't really any revolutions in the West, the United States or capitalist Europe, etc., Maoist third worldism, I think, has some insights into that. You don't have to become an ist to value the insights that point of view puts out. So I'm going to be doing a series on that. Those are just some of the upcoming things. Of course, history is full of surprises. We don't know exactly where things are going to go. But that, I guess, brings us up to the main topic that I wanted to discuss, which is the Force the Vote moment that's happening right now. Pressure being put on AOC to force a vote for Medicare for all in the United States, and how that fits into the theory of change that I have on this channel for the US left. So less than a week ago, I put out a video, short video, 10 minutes, congratulating comedian and YouTuber Jimmy Dore. He has about 850,000 subs, so pretty significant audience, used to be on the Young Turks, for putting out a public pressure campaign that actually caught on AOC to withhold votes from Nancy Pelosi to become Speaker of the House until Pelosi relents and puts Medicare for All up during a pandemic, obviously, a pandemic which incidentally, back in March and April, we had 36,000 to 40,000 new cases a day, I believe was the peak, and then the curve leveled off and flattened at a much lower number. Then there was a reopening, and by July, that had doubled up to 80,000 new cases a day. And since then, it's been totally uncontrolled spread. We now have passed 250,000 new cases in a single day, and that's every day. So that's like over 1.5 million new cases of COVID-19 a week. 40%, I believe, of all the known cases of COVID-19 in the world right now are in the United States. Meanwhile, countries like China, Vietnam, even New Zealand have gotten the spread very much under control, have had very few deaths, and it just doesn't need to be like this. But the U.S., it's like a wildfire, and they're completely incapable and unwilling to, control the spread of COVID. It's amazing. It's a genocide, is what it is. It's just they're through inaction allowing a genocide to occur, because it does. There is a racial component for sure. It's primarily people of color who are affected. Those are the communities in which it's most concentrated. So, the U.S. has a long history of genocide. I'm sure that factors in somehow to the plans of the COVID response. And, of course, the Democrats slammed Trump's laughable response to COVID. Biden, meanwhile, has not put out anything better. What's the plan? Where's the plan? What is it? I think that they're just crossing their fingers and hoping the vaccine will take care of everything. But they're still not planning on giving Medicare for all to people. And, if you think that the vaccine, which is like a vital life-saving thing, is that should be provided for free, well, then why not insulin? Or why not any other life-saving medication? So it's just crazy. It's just crazy, the kind of mental gymnastics that are going on. So speaking of mental gymnastics, Jimmy Dore said, force the vote on Medicare for all. Bring it to a vote in the U.S. House and watch who in Congress is willing to vote against health care during a pandemic. And then once you make people sign the dotted line and we know who is where, then that will be clarifying moving forward. And who knows, it could even pass. I think that's very unlikely. But I see this as a clarifying point. So I talked about how I view this as being relevant to an overall theory of change and rebuilding a socialist left in the United States. Let me explain. A couple of months ago, I did a video about a hashtag I made up and nobody really uses but me, Revolution 2030. What is that? Well, basically the concept is the Libertarians dominated the internet in the 2000s, and then they had a big moment in 2010 with the Tea Party. Then Social Democrats dominated in the late 2000s into the 2010s, things like TYT and Secular Talk, etc. And then they've had a big moment with Bernie Sanders. Well, my suggestion is that if we make the 2020s a far left media event, we make a big push in the 2020s, that by 2030 we can have a significant, Marxist moment in the United States that, for me, being a Marxist is where we need to be taking it in the first place. But so how do we get from here to there? Okay. What I see is probably a line of 10 to 15 decision points. So everybody pull your chairs a little bit closer because the Professor S4A is going to lay it down right now. We're students of socialism here on this channel. That's everything from classical Marxism, Marx and Engels, etc., to Marxism-Leninism around 1900 in the early 20th century, Maoism in the mid 20th century, and, every other kind of anti-imperial struggle that has gone under that rubric, including, pulling somewhat from anarchists and syndicalists who have made contributions to revolutions, although there are very few purely anarchist revolutions in history. But we look at all that, and one of the things, that we see, and these are things that Lenin pointed out like over a century ago. So again, no need to reinvent the wheel, and credit where credit's due. If you want these ideas, go read Lenin. We do audiobooks on the channel. They're very fresh today. Why? Because even though the technology has changed since that time, capitalism is not technology, it's property relations. Now, the property relations is in some ways tied to the technology or the level of technological development, but the property relations are the thing that makes capitalism capitalism. And if you still have the same property relations in 2020 that you did in 1900, then an analysis of those property relations from 1900 still applies. And really everything else, this is part of what Marx called historical materialism, is that history is shaped by the material things that happen. So really everything else in society, ideology, social formation, hangs off of the technology and the ways that we produce the things that we need to produce to survive. Food, shelter, everything else that we produce, industrial activity. Everything else in society hangs off of that and is basically produced for the purpose of maintaining that. All the ideology is a product of its time and a product of those conditions, and really is intended to serve those conditions. So again, looking back, what did Lenin say? You need 3 basic conditions for a revolution. By the way, what's a revolution? It's a change in who is the ruling class. Right now, the ruling class are capitalists. They own industry, because in capitalism, that's how it works. Industry is privately owned, and it's operated for profit at the whims of the tiny capitalist class, who are the only people who enjoy all of the liberty, equality, and fraternity that was put out, in the French Revolution. And the Enlightenment generally was this time of talking about freedoms and expanding liberty. Except it really, they expanded it from the monarchy, which they overthrew, to the capitalist class. Now, granted, the capitalist class is a little bit bigger than the monarchy was, but it's still got a long way to go as far as expanding those freedoms and that dignity to all. And that's what we as socialists are trying to do. We're trying to put the working class as the ruling class and share in those liberties and the burdens of work. There's still some work that needs to be done, but most of your work right now is going to make some capitalist rich. We get rid of the capitalist class by changing the property relations, then we can all do a lot less work for the same or better standard of living. So that's kind of the idea. So Lenin said 3 things that you need to have a revolution, a change in your system. You need a problem that is pervasive throughout society that everyone in society can recognize. For example, the United States is fucking falling apart, okay? And very few people would try to tell you differently. 2, you need spontaneous uprisings in response to that crisis. Well, we're in that now. For the last few years, there have been more and more street battles between, left and right, and then the spontaneous, uprisings that the flashpoint was the George Floyd murder, slow motion, sadistic, brutal murder by a cop of a black man in Minneapolis on camera, and he knew it was on camera. That as a flashpoint led to months of sustained uprisings. And then the third thing you need is organization that can take those sustained uprisings and point it in a particular direction towards political revolution, towards change, not just improved conditions in concessions, but actually towards a seizure of power. All right. We're just lacking the third thing right now. So what we need to do, I'm saying, is we need to recreate the Bernie Sanders movement, but outside the Democratic Party is step 1. So the decision point here, and we covered it extensively at the time here on this channel, was when, Bernie Sanders ran again in 2019, 2020 in the Democratic primary. And he ran as a Democrat, and he tried to use the front door, and he tried to be very polite. and say, oh, we're running just like any other candidate in this race, except he wasn't just running like any other candidate in the race. Every other candidate was in on the neoliberal consensus, and Bernie Sanders was running more as a social democrat. It gets a little blurry whether he was a social democrat or a democratic socialist who wanted to reform capitalism into socialism over time. It's outside the scope of this video of why that's not really a good strategy. But in any case, he's somewhere on that blurry line, social democrat, democratic socialist. We'll say he's a social democrat for now, although his coalition supporting him had both a left and a right wing. You could say that there were actual socialists in the Bernie Sanders coalition, such as me, such as some of you listening to this, who we thought that supporting Bernie Sanders was a good idea because he was reaching people. It's where the action was. And there was a lot of consciousness being raised. And it was a good opportunity for us as Marxists to get involved, again, in the left wing of the coalition. Then there was the right wing of the coalition that was like, capitalism needs some big Band-Aids and maybe it needs a bone reset. But, we can have a kinder, gentler capitalism. Okay, that was the movement. I think it accomplished some good, but Bernie sold us out. He quit. I mean, in 2016, and I did a video on this, by the end of his campaign in 2016, they were literally taking press releases written by Robbie Mook, the Hillary Clinton campaign manager, and releasing them on Bernie Sanders stationery. So, and passing them off as Bernie Sanders statements. So that's how much he was in bed with the Democratic Party then. I didn't know that until this year, but that's crazy. My personal position, I felt in 2016, Bernie Sanders was filling stadiums. If you can fill stadiums, start a third party. You have to do it. Start that left party that the U.S. is lacking. The Democrats, not since the days of, FDR has there been a significant sort of left-wing coalition that, even the Communist Party USA back in the 30s was participating in. They still do now, but that's a whole other story. I have videos on CPUSA. They are, let's say, a ghost of their former selves. Let's put it like that. But anyway, Bernie Sanders sells out again in 2020. And I always like to make this point. If Bernie Sanders had polled his supporters and said, hey, folks, it's not looking good. The establishment has circled the wagons. They're pushing hard on us. There's this pandemic coming in. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to stay in the race or do you want me to quit? I virtually guarantee upwards of 85% of the base would have said stay in. You know why? Because we saw that Bernie was doing more than just running for president. He was keeping a foot in the door of official life in the media, in just exposure to, a big platform and access to a big platform for demands like Medicare for All, which he would talk about in every single speech. He would actually highlight in a real way that people felt was representing them. He was highlighting the actual plight of what it's like trying to be a working person in the U.S. today in a way that, the Democrats and the Libertarians and the Republicans don't talk about. Or if they do at all, they give you all the wrong solutions. Bernie Sanders basically took the demands of Occupy, the housing crisis, student debt crisis, medical crisis, et cetera, and although he was not good on foreign policy, that's another conversation. But anyway, he was keeping a foot in the door for us to have access to get our issues onto the stage. And literally within 2 days of his conceding to Joe Biden, which he got absolutely nothing from, he extracted nothing from Joe Biden. He conceded, the race defaulted to Joe Biden, and we got nothing in return, nothing whatsoever. This whole push him left thing is a joke. You know that already, most likely, if you're listening to this channel. So as soon as that happened, Bernie Sanders, hitched his wagon to his good friend Joe so he could go back to having, dinner parties with him and the Bidens. Well, what happened? Total silence. Medicare for All disappeared from the media. Disappeared. So this was a decision point then. Were socialists, were people who were part of that coalition going to follow Bernie Sanders' lead, or were they going to stay independent? And, I mean, this breaks down into the sub question of voting for Biden or voting third party, whatever. Our position on both here was to stay independent and don't vote for Biden. First of all, I think that, vote for Biden if you want to. I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but ultimately, choosing between two bourgeois politicians is a job for the bourgeoisie. This system belongs to capitalists. That's a question for the capitalists to decide. We don't really substantially benefit in either direction from that. If anything, Trump, I have a hard time saying Trump might have been better because he didn't start any new major wars. That's a super low bar, though. And he was also awful in some other ways. So I like to say that Democrats and Republicans are equally bad, but in different ways. And the Libertarians, don't even get me started. I did a video on that. It's more of the neoliberal austerity that you already hate, but maybe even in a more concentrated form. Libertarians, the basic thing there, the 2-second summary is libertarians think you can have capitalism without a police state and without imperialism. You can't. That's where it's coming from. It's coming from capitalism. Next. End of story. These have been settled questions for like a long time. Libertarians keep insisting that you can somehow have capitalism without imperialism and a police state. You cannot. You cannot, because none of these countries you're currently exploiting are going to keep giving you their resources at exploitative, for an exploitative exchange where they get totally screwed in return, unless you're violently threatening them. That's the only way that this system as it is keeps going. And likewise, who's going to domestically enforce your private property rights except for a police state? This whole property relations system that only serves like 1%, maybe 5 or 10% at most of the people. How are you going to maintain that when 90% of the people would stand up tomorrow if there was no one standing in their way? Just like we saw this summer where people didn't have to go to work for a few weeks and they started tearing the country apart because they know the country is strangling them. Well, that's what would happen. All right. So coming back off the libertarian thing, coming back to Bernie and Biden, that was a major decision point is, do you stay independent? Do you criticize Bernie for doing that? Or do you go along with them? And I would say those of us who stayed independent, that was the beginning of rebuilding a serious left. Those of us who went independent off of that. And what I'm saying is that we need to rebuild the Bernie Sanders movement outside the Democratic Party. If you want a quick version of why this is so important, I put an audiobook up on this channel, The Case for an Independent Left Party by Howie Hawkins. Whether you think Howie Hawkins was a charismatic candidate or not is immaterial. It's an excellent, well-researched article about how an inside-outside strategy doesn't work. The Democrats change you. You don't change them. They make you sever your ties with outside institutions. It's wasted money, time, and effort. And until we make an independent left coalition, it's going to go nowhere. So, again, the solution we've been putting out on this channel, tied in somewhat with the Revolution 2030 slogan, is independent third-party left. Take PSL, take Green Party, IWW. DSA has to stop endorsing Democrats. They endorse mainly Democrats. I have said some charitable things about DSA up to this point. From here on, until DSA formally declares that they will no longer endorse Democrats, DSA is off the table. Sorry. They do some actually good community work. I do think the stuff in the Democratic Party completely undermines the rest of it, and we should abandon them and build other organizations instead who do not collaborate with, the Democrats. So, but all these other groups, you're not going to get PSL and Greens to just merge. I don't think. There's very similar platforms between them, but they're distinct institutions that want to govern themselves in their own way. The IWW has a different ideology and is a labor union. In fact, they have a ban on having, political officers or representatives being in a position of authority in the union. So they're apolitical in that sense. But these are all people who could work together in a coalition, retaining their organizational identities and, their distinct, the outfits that they bring to it. But you make a coalition and you fight, you come up with a common list of demands, you fight for it. And by doing that, you start painting the picture for people of what we could actually accomplish in a socialist coalition in the United States. For example, nonprofit banking and loan system, nonprofit credit system, Medicare for all, public housing, doing more of these basic things, having a food system that is not profit oriented, doing all of these things, decommodifying basic needs things would be a huge step forward for selling people on what is possible in a socialist coalition. So, like I said, decision point one, Bernie and Biden. It was contentious. It shook up S4A quite a bit. We moved forward, and now we're at a second decision point, which is force the vote. So we put Bernie on the spot, and he folded. Now we're putting AOC and the squad on the spot, because this is the other basic remnant of, we're going to totally transform the Democratic Party through the squad. Well, AOC so far has been resisting the calls to actually do what she got elected saying she would do. I mean, she was the one saying, bring the ruckus. She was the one saying, we don't have to wait 100 years. And now we're in the middle of a pandemic, and she's like, we shouldn't do this now. Well, when? They have no other strategy, and they have no real good reason to not to do it now. So, this will be a clarifying moment. We say force the vote. Let AOC, get put on the spot to do this, which in turn could put many other people on the spot. Medicare for All, we did a video on this channel about, has 100 co-sponsors. Yet, I did a little content analysis on like a dozen of the more prominent co-sponsors of Medicare for All. Bernie Sanders was the only one at that time who was actually talking about it on his Twitter or his website or anything. All these other people co-sponsored it, but then they didn't actually do shit for it. So, see what I mean? I saw a tweet the other day that was like, if all the co-sponsors of Medicare for All actually wanted it, we'd have it already. Because you'd have 100 people in the system fighting for it. They put their name on it as lip service, and then they let it, die on the vine. That's their thing. It's just lip service. So AOC, she's been outspoken. We can do this. We got to get it done. Well, she literally rode into office on the rage and the strong desire for change of, all the people who put her in office. And what, she angling for the Senate? Like, come on. If she doesn't want to be called a careerist and whatever, she should do this. I don't know what will happen. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet. That's why we're saying force the vote, so that we come to a point where people have to make decisions. They go on the record, and then we can make our decisions strategically as far as where we're going to go, and we will see the movement split. So one of the things that you see on Twitter around Force the Vote is, oh, this is tearing the left apart. No. It's not tearing the left apart. It's seeing who is actually willing to go the distance and who isn't. Who is willing to take the side of covering for political inaction during a pandemic, and who is willing to not, have this golden calf of AOC, and who is willing to say, well, we put you in there to do that. You were our tool, and you didn't do it. Now, of course, as a Marxist, what do I think is going to happen is we're going to make demands of the system strategically that the system will not fulfill, and then we will keep rallying people to revolution. So that's the point. Let me say that again. Do I think that Medicare is going to pass? No. Do I think that it will pass on the fifth vote? Not necessarily. Well, then why do it? Because you out the system as being completely unwilling and probably unable to meet the demands of the people. And then once you have done that, and you have done that enough times that you have convinced enough people that you can't work within the system, because you can't work within the system, then you pull them into your independent left coalition, and we get some change the old-fashioned way. So is this going to be the last decision point? No. I think it's just the second out of 10 or 15, because probably what will happen is, the first point was Bernie, like having this kind of, long shot of run within the system as a Democrat. All right. Well, that didn't work twice. So if you're still wedded to that, you may be lost. I mean, those people can pull their heads out of their asses anytime they want. We'll be here. Second one, is the squad going to work? Well, probably not. That may take one or two more decision points for people really to see that. Okay, so then those of us who are willing to keep fighting independently, we press forward. What's the next decision point? Well, it might be something like we try the Bernie Sanders or the squad thing again, but not within the Democratic Party. So that will be more of a question of like, not just can you run as a Democrat and get change, but can you run within the government at all and get change, like through, like significant reforms or something like that. And what we know from socialist history is no, you can't. You can't vote in socialism. If you ever do elect, and this has been the position of Marxists for a very long time, if you do elect any socialists, actual socialists, not social democrats, to office, what can you do? Well, you make the reforms you can, you dismantle capitalism as much as you can, but ultimately you need that revolution from outside the system. And socialists would like a peaceful revolution. We would like the capitalists to just say, okay, our system sucks. Here, let's all run this together. We have too much competition. It's creating waste. It's creating poverty, hardship, exploitation, needless death, blah, 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 blah. They're never going to do that. I mean, yeah, technically they could. Marx wrote this way back in the day. He's like, it's possible that there could be a peaceful change, but it's not likely. And this has actually never happened. I mean, Marx was writing that in the 19th century, like the, he's writing that in like the 1860s, I think. 150, 60 years went by, and no, they don't ever, Marx was right to say it's theoretically, technically possible that the capitalists could just give up. But no, they will keep using their system of violence to stay in power as long as they possibly can. We're facing an extinction event with climate change and climate emergency. The capitalists still aren't giving up. So, yeah, it probably will come down to a forcible revolution at some point. I don't know when that is, but hopefully they do just give up. But I don't know. Do you want to let the planet get destroyed? Probably not. So anyway, like I said, there is a couple of decision points now determining who wants to keep trying to work within the Democratic Party, and also identifying who are the stooges. So we've seen Nomiki Konst and Ben Dixon, these YouTube personalities who have some tie to the Democratic Party, or the TYT sphere. Anna Kasparian came out attacking Jimmy Dore, trying to make this about whether Jimmy Dore is an asshole, not should we have a vote on Medicare for all. Now. So we see these people who are more willing to defend AOC than they are to try to fight for Medicare for all during a pandemic. So we'll go through the phase of probably doing this within the Democratic Party. Then there will probably be a phase of trying to do it as an independent, as the left coalition through the electoral process. Probably that won't work. And then some of us will keep going for more of like a general strike and non-electoral things. And there will be a series of decision points there that put people on the record and make people take sides. Because that's ultimately how these things get decided, is you face a big moment and there's a litmus test. That's how it works. We try to study on this channel, like I said, the whole history of socialism. Early Marxist theory and the revolutions and uprisings of the 19th century, the USSR, what we learned from that, China, what we've learned from that, etc. Vietnam, Laos, Cuba, Korea. We learn what we can everywhere that there is an uprising revolution, Africa, South America, etc. And you take what works and you discard what doesn't work, and you try to learn from that. The struggle against capitalism doesn't end on the first try. It doesn't end in success on the first try, and it also doesn't end in permanent failure on the first try, on the first failed try either. So, keep that in mind. But onward we will press, and, every time there will be people who peel off on, the favor of not doing independent strategy towards revolution, and they start, they get bogged down in some failed loop of either defending Democrats or defending electoralism or whatever. The rest of us are going to press on. all I can say is keep advancing the dialectic. You know, we make a move, they make a move. We make a move, they make a move. If we don't make a move, the game doesn't go anywhere, you know, and we just keep suffering. We got to keep making moves. And so, in summary, rebuild the Bernie movement outside the Democratic Party, keep pushing beyond electoralism with that coalition, all the way to, you know, full change, general strike, whatever it takes. And, you know, there will be new people who join us, and there will be people who peel off and get stuck in dead ends. But we keep marching forward, and that's the basic idea. All right, I think that is all that I wanted to say about that. I hope that that's clear. Actually, I would like to make one more general point about left unity. So the left can be broadly defined. I think Hakeem, another YouTuber, did a great video about this called Left Unity is Not a Good Idea, or Is It? So if we talk about the left generally as social democrats, anarchists, and Marxists, and then there are many sub-tendencies within those three camps. Social democrats basically being people who want to reform and restrain capitalism, basically do welfare capitalism. Anarchists, people who want a stateless, classless society now, like the day of the revolution. And then Marxists, who believe that you have to have the revolution, then start building socialism, and it'll probably take you a few decades before you get to a point where there's really significant change, because there's many steps you need to go through. The day of the revolution, there's still a bourgeoisie. You have to suppress them, confiscate their things, collectivize industry. You have to re-socialize people to be able to participate in that new economy after people have been socialized for decades to be competitive, not cooperative. Anyway, that's why I'm a Marxist, because I think that, well, so I participated in the founding of a worker cooperative. I saw just even in that little cooperative how, you know, people couldn't participate in it. They were still looking for a boss to blame for things. It was like it just wasn't getting through their skulls, you know? And I think it's going to take time, and I think it's going to take a real serious national level effort to reorient working people towards a cooperative economy, just to understand their place in it and how to participate in it and what it means, and the freedom and the responsibility that it brings. I think it's going to take a while. So anyway, that's why I'm not an anarchist. I think many anarchists are fine people. I just don't agree with the anarchism ideology and that theory of social change and revolution. I do like a lot of anarchist ideas within that, but you know, again, I just don't think it's a cohesive strategy for change, as well as social democracy. The main problem there is if you leave capitalists in power, as they do, because basically they're, you know, basically just trying to greatly reform capitalism to be more balanced for workers, so that workers are a counterpower, you know, within capitalism. You get some concessions, but the capitalists will revoke those concessions the minute that it's politically feasible for them to do that. You know, we saw that in the 1930s, the FDR government in the United States made a sort of class peace. Lenin writes about this stuff a lot, you know, because when they were contemplating revolution and concessions and what does it all mean? Well, the FDR government threw out these concessions, and they were like, here, let's have a class peace. You workers don't do revolution, and we capitalists won't lean on your neck so hard. How does that sound? And then we had this golden age of like the middle class substitute for revolution. In other words, don't take power, just accept this middle class status for some of you, not all, and we'll buy you out. And then that lasted up until about the late 70s, 1980. Reagan came in and they started pulling those concessions back hard. Why? Because they thought that they finally could outmuscle us, and that the threat of revolution wasn't there anymore, which is why they gave us the concessions in the first place. And, well, it's 40 years on from 1980 right now, and where are we at? Well, most of those concessions and social programs have been stripped from us. So concession seeking is not a good strategy. Let me explain another reason why it's not a good strategy. So they only give concessions because we have made them afraid that we're going to take their power. Let that sink in for a second. They only offer concessions After we have made them afraid, we're going to take everything, that we're going to take their power itself away from them. So the very fact that they're offering you concessions means that you have them on the run. They're genuinely frightened, and they're pursuing this strategy of offering you concessions to get you to back off. In other words, if they offer you concessions, it might as well be like the white flag is the next thing. Well, just don't take the concessions, take their power, push forward. Taking concessions is such a stupid thing. So if you go out with a concessions-seeking strategy, it's so paradoxical, because you're saying, well, the only way I'm going to get these concessions is if I make them fear for their very power. And then they will give me concessions, but they keep their power. Why would you do that? Because why wouldn't you just take their power, and then that's that, and then they can never threaten you again with structural violence, which is why you were organizing against them in the first place. It's not a good system. You want to end, that's why you want improved conditions, because your conditions suck. So if they offer you concessions, they're afraid for their power, just take their power. That's what we say as revolutionaries, not reformers. You can't reform this system. Capitalism has a certain logic to it in the first place, of competition and resource consolidation. That can't be changed. And beyond that, again, they only put the concessions out there because they're afraid. The second they're not afraid, they'll just revoke them. Then we have to go through the same process all over again. They offer concessions because they're afraid for their power. That means you're getting close. So just take the few extra steps and take their power. And if people start arguing for the concessions, stop listening to them. Shut them up. Because you have an opportunist there, or just a counter-revolutionary there. So that's key. Always stay looking out for people. So you might say, but S4A, aren't you for pushing the Medicare for all vote? And I say, well, first of all, if we get Medicare for all, fine. I'm not going to argue that we shouldn't have Medicare for all. First of all, I don't think we're going to get it, but that's not the point. I don't offer that saying that we should make that the end goal by any means. In fact, this is more of a tactical thing of just getting propaganda so that we put the system on the record as saying, no, you're dying in droves and you still can't have Medicare for all. Then we go out and say, see, the system will never give you what you want. The only possibility is to take out the ruling class and we become the ruling class. Because we wouldn't do this to ourselves, and we won't. So that's the point. And we're not going out concession seeking like that's the end of the story. We go out looking for power. They give us concessions. I'm not going to stop them, but we don't stop until we have power. Hope that's clear. Any questions, put them in the comments. So that is the paradox of concessions. But I was talking about left unity and Hakeem and that video. So when I talk about this coalition outside the Democratic Party, this Bernie movement, yeah, it's going to have Marxists and anarchists and social democrats. Do we agree on the kind of society we want? No. But we do all agree we don't want unrestrained capitalism. So I think at these different decision points that I've been talking about, you will see different people peeling away from it, and people may change tendencies in the middle of that process as a result of their political growth and their meditations on it and their conversations that they have with other people as they continue to think about this topic and turn it over in their mind. I mean, I started as more of an anarchist personally, and then it was through thinking about it that I decided, I think Marxism actually makes a little more sense. So, that can happen. Don't write people off just because they have one opinion today. That goes both ways. Don't completely write everybody else off because you may not end up with the same point of view that you have today. Ultimately, it's all determined by, the decisions you have to actually make. You can go out with guiding principles, and that's key. But who you actually make alliances with within certain bounds, okay? We don't want wanton opportunism here. But yeah, Marxists and anarchists probably will be working together right up to the very end, through to revolution. Social Democrats, probably not so much, although some of them may come over to more of a revolutionary viewpoint. But all I'm saying is, within the left unity thing, yes, represent your tendency, but it doesn't make everyone else automatically 100% wrong. And, likewise, just, I guess, try not to get in people's faces is what I'm trying to say. That said, try to have evidence for whatever position you do take. And, but, don't be entirely closed-minded. All right. On that note, I'm going to wrap this up. I actually did several takes of this video because there just was so much ground to cover, especially trying to bring new people into the fold. I hope that this has been helpful. I probably will put up a couple of other audio files towards the end of the year. If you're on Twitter or whatever, get involved with the Force the Vote hashtag. Get out there in the conversations, get in the trenches, explain this point of view. Try to win people over to it. Why it's important to keep pushing, put people on the record, because that's where we get energy. That's where we get momentum. You look at the time between Bernie Sanders and now, and it's like there was so much energy, in January and February and March. We were included in the conversation. We were reaching people. There was a lively discussion happening. Bernie quit. We were shut out overnight, and then we started eating each other. That definitely happened on the S4A Facebook page. And now that we're involved in a fight again, like a struggle, a collective struggle, the infighting goes down. So what we want ultimately is an end to capitalism. Let's keep that in mind. And, keep trying to, like I said, advance the dialectic. They move, we move, they move, we move, and we move this thing forward. We got to do that according to, proven principles. There will always be risks. It's not like theory is like the absolute roadmap, because every historical moment contains some unique aspects to it, but we can reduce that risk by studying history. You can never get it completely gone, but you can certainly not just totally reinvent the wheel. Instead, try to refine and improve on what has come before. So I guess I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. Thanks for listening to me. I hope I haven't been rambling too much in this video. Like I said, I have done a few takes and just had a lot on my mind. I think that more than any of this, it's just hard watching. I did a video about, the lack of COVID benefits being psychological torture. I think I did that in September or October, and I never thought we would be in late December, and people are still a week and a half away from the end of the eviction moratorium, and there's still no new aid. This is shocking even for me. Just watching the United States torture its people with this uncertainty and anxiety. The wealth is there, natural scarcity, it's gone. All we have is artificial scarcity because the capitalists keep things from us. We have artificial scarcity due to exclusion based on capitalist property relations. That's what we have. People are just being denied access to the stuff that is there, but they're just not being given, it's not being given to them, even though we need it to live. Get involved with a political party or organization or union or solidarity network or mutual aid network. Look it up in your area. There's probably going to be at least a Green Party chapter. Get in there, meet people if you're not already connected, and please stay safe. We'll have more current events as things pop up, and definitely please do leave a comment, and just wishing everyone well at this really difficult time. I'm getting a little bit emotional because honestly, it's scary, and watching this community grow, it's meant a lot to see people who also care and want to fight and, get organized and do the right thing here and stand up against the system for real change. And watching the way we're getting treated is so bad, but we're going to have to endure this and worse. As we press forward, there will be many, 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 many more attacks that will take many different forms. So closing out 2020 here with a message of solidarity to everyone involved in the fight. Keep fighting for an independent left that can lead the working class to socialist revolution. We will catch you in the next video.